This video is our way of welcoming you to a change in the California desert and a change in which we do our landscaping. It's a change that we in Palm Desert believe is one that is attractive, that is good common sense in terms of water use, that is one that brings us into harmony with our natural surroundings, and a change that our city welcomes you to participate in.
Welcome to My Desert, a place well known for its hostile climate, but little understood for its natural complexity. If you're set on doing business in my backyard, you may want to pay close attention to this video. It explains how landscaping is supposed to be done here in the Coachella Valley and tells you about some folks who can be real helpful. You've heard of been there, done that. Well, these folks have tried growing just about everything in this hot desert sun, learned lots of lessons the hard way, and are here to save you a lot of your time, energy, and money trying to learn what they already know. The Coachella Valley is one of the hottest, driest deserts in the world. Palm Desert, one of 9 cities on the desert floor, is home to a mix of housing and resort developments, from apartment complexes to the traditional single-family unit to the high-end country club setting and resort-style environment embodied by the Marriott Desert Springs Resort and the pure desertscape of the Bighorn Resort. It's a matter of personal taste which one is favorable, but it's certain that if more developers and homeowners were to take note of the vast strides made in desert landscaping in recent years, the reduced costs, maintenance, and environmental benefits would be very apparent. Low-water landscaping, balanced with an eye toward lushness and beauty, is not only practical, it's become a necessity. It is, in fact, the law in Palm Desert, and local experts have been studying plant life and other aspects of landscaping for years. What they have found will probably surprise you, even if you're a landscaping expert.
One of the things that I think tells you that there has been a shift in paradigm, a quiet revolution in landscaping, is when you go to some of the very, quote, high-end country club projects, not just in Palm Desert, but in some of our neighboring cities in the valley and so on, and you walk in and you see what they're doing, and it's very different than what you would have seen certainly 20 years ago, even sometimes as little as 10 years ago. I, as an example, always think that I knew the world had changed when I walked into a multi-million-dollar home and the signature plant in the entryway garden was a creosote bush. And traditionally, a creosote bush is one of those junk plants that you just bulldoze out so you can put something pretty in. Well, creosote, you trim it, you give it a little bit of moisture, and so on, and you have this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful shrub plant. And by the way, every time it rains, it produces an aroma that those of us who live in the desert go, ah, that's the desert. It's the smell of creosote after rain. And so when you see that happening at the very highest end of the development scale, you know the world has changed. And you know that people's perception of desert landscaping, climate-appropriate landscaping, drought-resistant landscaping, whatever term you want, is not green rock and a cactus, or xeriscape, meaning just empty dirt. We found a way to exist with our resources around us and find something that we find beautiful. And I think that's wonderful.
25 years ago, it seemed to me, and you looked at how people landscaped, and it were a couple of palm trees and grass. In the time period, we're now seeing a lot more innovative and creativeness in the landscaping plans.
The bottom line is this: there is a challenge to change in the air. The challenge is to work with nature rather than against it. Why not avail yourself of the expertise and database built up by Palm Desert and Coachella Valley Water District professionals over the past 20 years? A decade ago, the city of Palm Desert took action to begin developing the desert landscape theme. The Coachella Valley Water District, already a familiar hand in the area of water conservation and desert plant growth, encouraged the city. CVWD had already set up a test plot to determine the survivability of various desert plants. What they discovered was the heat, low humidity, sparse precipitation, and wind of the Coachella Valley was unsuitable to many common desert plants from the Phoenix area. As a result, CVWD developed its Lush and Efficient manual to help developers. It must be said the manual emphasizes the efficient side of the equation. Lush is a goal of desert planters who, having long since recognized the need to develop water, heat, and wind-tolerant species, are not willing to give up the color and beauty. With the help of the expertise developed by Coachella Valley landscaping professionals over the past 10 to 20 years, Lush and Efficient are not mutually exclusive concepts.
But I see the lushness. I don't see anybody here really wanting to create the Tucson environment of rock and a few desert plants. That's one of the things I guess I find enjoyable about the valley is the beauty of it and how the plant materials blend into the lifestyle. And I'd hate to see us end up with just all rock every place.
If you probably look throughout our community in the 70s, 60s and 70s, a lot of rock and very little landscape in the front yards of homes, for example, because people moved out of here in the summer and they didn't want to maintain a lot of grass and turf and other plant material around the home. They came back in later fall and they enjoyed the Coachella Valley probably December through April, and then left again for their other home. Somewhat of a retirement community. In the 70s and 80s, we had a lot of the influence of Orange County or Los Angeles basin, where everything was lush and efficient, making this an oasis, and using the plant palette that was available in the Los Angeles basin. In the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of interest in both of our City Hall and of our residents that wanted a desert, a responsible landscape, a desert theme that not only we were able to produce on city projects, including the medians, but people started putting that type of landscape in their homes. So we saw a change in philosophy of our own residents.
The extremely dry desert of the Coachella Valley is quite different from the semi-arid Mediterranean climate of the Los Angeles Basin and Orange County, of course. But, and this may come as a surprise to even the expert landscaper, the Coachella Valley is also remarkably different from the relatively moist Sonoran Desert of southern Arizona and the cooler Mojave Desert of the Las Vegas area. One look at the natural landscape shows that the Southern California desert lacks the large plants that are common in Arizona deserts. This is because the Coachella Valley lacks the moisture to support large plants. Our local desert also has higher temperatures than the Phoenix, Tucson, and Las Vegas areas. The bottom line is that plants that do well in other areas do not necessarily do well in Palm Desert. The good news is those that do well really flourish.
Some of the trees used, Palo Verde trees, Lysoloma trees, mesquite trees of various types, desert ironwood, desert willow. A number of Arizona trees can be used here very nicely.
This is a very foreign place to most Americans. American history begins on the East Coast and the lush and the green lands, and we moved west and we hauled our ideas of home landscaping and park landscaping, and really our ideas of beauty have all come from the east to the west. And so learning to love this place for what it is rather than what someplace else is or was is a difficult thing for a lot of us to do.
We live in a desert. We live in a desert that has potential, fantastic potential beauty beyond what we're used to, beyond the lawns and the beds of petunias that we're used to. And I think it's important from an aesthetic and an environmental and to some extent a psychological reason to use plants that actually belong here, that give us a sense of place, that we are not Beverly Hills planted in the desert. We are in the desert, and we recognize where we are, we accept that, we use it to its full aesthetic potential, and that in itself would be much more attractive than trying to create an artificial environment that doesn't belong here.
Visitors to the Coachella Valley look around and marvel at the lushness of this desert resort environment, but that lushness is not a natural occurrence. The landscape has been manipulated for most of the 20th century, catering to the tourism and resort living style, encouraging the use of plants more commonly found in the Mediterranean and temperate regions of the world. Several of these non-native plants do well in the Coachella Valley, provided they receive large amounts of irrigated water. But the city of Palm Desert and the Coachella Valley Water District believe there is a better way. Rather than landscaping with large amounts of turf and high water use plants, they encourage the use of low water use plants and water-efficient irrigation systems, which better promote the essence of the desert and displays a conviction for stewarding, preserving, and conserving the natural resources. This conviction found realization in the Bighorn Resort, Desert Willows Golf Course, and Indian Ridge. These three resort developments are testament to the concepts of environmental sensitivity, practicality, and unsurpassed beauty, and they are a part of the movement to work with nature rather than against.
I think the city of Palm Desert is inviting people to take a look at options. Part of those are increasingly mandated by scarcity of resources. Part of those are mandated by the legislature in Sacramento and by things in Washington, D.C. and other places. And I hope part of them are just simply a product of common sense. And so our business is to invite people in who live in our Palm Desert family and say, let us help you do something that's good for you, good for where you live, good for wildlife, good for plants, attractive, colorful, less work, and ultimately a better place to be.
As a result of its vision, the city developed landscaping ordinances promoting the use of drought-tolerant plants. It's illegal to squander water in Palm Desert, but city officials have not just set laws into place willy-nilly and left it up to the developers to fend for themselves. The city of Palm Desert and the Coachella Valley Water District have a staff of experts on hand to help developers and even individual homeowners design a landscape that is practical, beautiful, and meets the code.
But I don't think we ever want to be at the point that we say this is the absolute and you have to stick with this exact number. If you come up with a plan and it makes more sense to have more turf or less turf, we ought to be willing to listen to that. What we want is something that fits with the development rather than something that is an absolute and a bureaucratic nightmare.
As we enter into that 21st century, I think the communities in California that will be winners will be the communities that have taken good care of their resources. And when a business comes to town, or a potential resident comes to town, or tourists come to town, they get the idea that here is a community that cares about where it is. And that is important for our economic future. And that's going to make Palm Desert one of the winners in the next century. And we have to plan for it now, and those are the kinds of changes I think you're going to be seeing again and again.
We recognize a need. It's different than a lot of areas that have a drought one year and then an abundance of water in other years. We always have a drought because we're a desert. And so it's only through good long-term planning are we able to ensure that the valley can grow in the manner in which the people here want it to. And that is, I think, is a very quality of life destination.
The study of desert landscaping over many years has produced a vast amount of experience in dealing with the unique problems and advantages of desert plant usage. Some of the things we've learned: plants can grow too fast in the desert, group too close together or too close to structures, leaving them insufficient room to grow. Desert plants have specific watering needs, which oftentimes conflict with the watering needs of trees and turf. Desert trees need ample spacing for their root structures. High winds here in the desert make it crucial to select trees that send out deep-rooting structures. We've learned to limit use of turf areas and to keep turf and other high-maintenance planting off of medians. Not only is it too difficult and hazardous to maintain, it requires too much water.
When we did a pilot program in 1986 with about a mile of median, we followed that landscape installation up with a survey of our residents. And vast majority, over 80% of the people that responded to the survey, enjoyed that landscape on the median more than they did turf and trees. They liked the desert theme, they liked the plants selected, they liked some succulents, cacti, and native trees on that median. As a change in philosophy, we followed that survey up, knowing that now we have the mandate for from the residents to continue on with that landscape. We followed that up with some surveys of the cost of maintaining turf and trees with the cost of maintaining drought tolerant. And what we found is that the water costs were substantially lower. The maintenance costs were about half of the cost of turf and trees. And that was enough for us to take and start to design medians, the 9 miles of medians remaining in the city that were unlandscaped, and that's how we proceeded with this project. Since that time, we recognize the citizens enjoy that landscape. We as a city enjoy that because it cuts our maintenance dollars.
We've also learned to use zonal landscaping themes, that is, grouping plants having similar cultural needs. It's also important to transition from plant groupings requiring more water to plant groupings requiring less and less irrigation.
What we're finding is that people are beginning to do, in essence, what I would call the oasis look, in which you take one area of a yard and various things like that, and really have that feel that's perhaps somewhat tropical, and a feel that really makes you, green just overwhelms you. And then in other areas of the yard, we move away from that in what's called zonal planting, and we come away from that and find other kinds of things that are necessary. Someone else may not choose to have any of that lush area of a yard. It doesn't fit their perceptions of what they want, or their perceptions of attractiveness, or whatever it happens to be, or maintenance levels and so on. So people are going to do that. But the idea is to be thoughtful about what we plant, where we plant it, what the consequences of having it there, how much maintenance is it going to take, and how much water is it going to use, and what the lifespan of that plant happens to be, as well as such things as ultimate size.
We encourage you to think about putting desert plant material or low water use plant materials in the same zone or in the same area as with other desert plants, and not be including these plants in, as an example, around grass areas. This particular plant, which is the desert marigold, is a low water use, drought tolerant plant. If you were to put this in a zonal landscape, you would want to find this typically in an arid zone or a transitional zone. In other words, a mix of, with a few non-native shrubs, but it generally does best in a very desert or arid type of landscape.
The bottom line is, ask the expert staffs at the City of Palm Desert and at the Coachella Valley Water District. They know how to help you succeed. And they want to help you achieve the Palm Desert theme in your landscaping projects. Here then are a few of the prime examples of desert species which offer the best of all worlds. Well-placed trees are the anchor plants for almost any development. Perhaps no other plant type, though, deserves such careful consideration as the tree. Trees take a lot longer to establish than the other elements of the landscaping palette, and such factors as summer shade, room for root structure, and cleanliness, that is to say, a tree that doesn't drop a lot of seed or leaves or fruit, are all worth serious study. Homeowners are often torn between a slow-growing tree that yields maximum results at maturity and a fast grower that fills the landscaping in quickly. The developer must also decide with an eye toward the future.
Oftentimes you'll find this tree planted too close to entryways, in front lawn areas, or in backyards adjacent to walls. This particular tree, the mesquite tree, really requires an awful lot of room to allow it to grow properly. Here's why. You'll see how these branches begin to weep and are very broad spreading. This is its natural form, and it wants to do this to protect itself from dehydration, to protect itself and to keep itself cool in the summertime. However, several times we'll plant these trees once again too close to retaining walls, too close to entryways, just in the wrong location, and we don't ever allow for the proper development of this branch structure. As a result, several times you'll find that these trees are pruned up and limbed off, and these branches are limbed off to where you no longer have the graceful form that you see here, but you have a very contrived, very symmetrical tree, and that's just not what the mesquite is all about.
Palm trees perform well, but while they love the heat, they require lots of water. Another downside to most palm species, they require a lot of maintenance. Desert shrubs are almost as varied as trees. The Coachella Valley expert uses them in a variety of functions: accents, color, and flower bearers, and as privacy screens. Shrubs vary in height from 3 to 10 feet, so place them wisely.
A very great shrub to use in the Coachella Valley, which is underutilized, is creosote. Creosote can be very attractive on a year-round basis and can flower a couple of times a year when it's maintained. There's also, of course, leucophyllums. Those have been around for a while, and they come in different shades of grays that can also be very attractive.
The leucophyllums require very little water. In fact, in the summertime, if you only irrigate them 5 to 10 minutes a day with 1 gallon emitters, they'll do quite nicely. Now in the wintertime, you'll want to back away from some of that watering and water it every other day or every third day for, once again, 5 to 10 minutes. Now if you're looking for a little perennial, almost a perennial type of a shrub to use in your garden, the Salvia gregae is a wonderful little specimen plant that acts as an accent, can be planted near entryways, but it should be planted, I would recommend, more in the semi-shade as opposed to the full sun. The reason for that is because you'll find that during the summertime this plant will suffer a little bit from the intense heat. Once again, this is a very drought-tolerant plant that requires very little watering, and it's very important to remember that when using landscape material here in the desert, watering is a critical factor. You can either overwater or underwater these plants. Especially the drought-tolerant plants, give consideration to keeping the water usage to a very bare minimum.
Ground covers add color and texture to the desert landscape and can spread up to 10 feet.
Another factor to give consideration to is how these plants grow together. Bougainvillea is also a plant that will grow at least 8 to 10 feet wide. If you mix that with lantana, think about how these two plants are going to come together. And do you like that look, or are you going to want to maintain those as separate individual plants? If you want to maintain them as separate individual plants, I would strongly recommend that you probably space these plants anywhere from 7 to 10 feet apart.
Accents are plants that are used for decorative purposes only. These are particularly useful on medians and in desert garden situations, and they include the ocotillo, red yucca, beargrass, and many varieties of cactus. Desert landscaping is an art. Coachella Valley landscaping is a craft that has branched from that art, and if you're not an expert, you could get burned, and so could your plants. Consult with the people who have made their living with Coachella Valley plants, the people who want you to take the challenge to change. The experts at Palm Desert City Hall and at the Coachella Valley Water District invite you to work with nature rather than against it. The best time to do it right is the first time, and we're here to help you reach your goals.